put it on, I'm become a 18th century person. This kind of completes the whole thing.
What you had for the Indians?
One side of the Indians, the other side of the British. Sometimes the French and Indians. You're 247 Spain.
I put my umbrella on there so it's wet, but I figured it wouldn't make any difference.
I want you to behave yourself. It's the only one they could get.
Really proud.
A lot of it I got. He was sorry I wouldn't. The county courthouse. Oh, that place is fabulous. The county courthouse here in Augusta.
That's what he's done.
You understand? That is the best records, land records and stuff like that I've ever seen. Oh my. So yeah. Oh yeah, not to. Yeah, she cheated. She decided not to dress today, so. No, as far as I'm concerned, she is. Wearing these curling clothes like that. That's true. Yeah. What? Stay home sometimes? Yeah. Seriously, don't tell her I'm leaving.
Look forward to it.
Good. I'm going to try to do a good job.
Save it
everybody hear me all right? All right, well, very good. My name is Ray Wright, President of the Augusta County Historical Society, and we are excited to have you here this afternoon for our spring meeting. We are, of course, collaborating with the Frontier Culture Museum, who has given us this really nice venue today, and this is co-sponsored by the museum as well. Before I turn it over to Nancy and then introduce our speaker a little bit later, I'd like to remind you that we do have refreshments in the back there, so you can help yourself at any time that you would like to. And again, thank you for showing up this afternoon. I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you all for coming out. It was nice of the rain just to start right when we were ready to come in here, but that's the way it is. We do need the rain. So I just want to hit you with two things. One is, this is the Augusta County Historical Society Spring Meeting. If you're not a member, that's fine, but I sure hope you will become a member, because you can support all the wonderful work we do in preserving and educating people about this special place that we call Augusta County. And so for today, in our archives, we're getting ready to have our 60th anniversary soon. So we have a lot of stuff that we've accumulated over the years. Sometimes we don't know what stuff we have because we've moved from a funeral home where we were at one time to the basement of Augusta County Government Center, basement of the courthouse, and now we're in the Smith Center. And so boxes sometimes get packed and don't get unpacked. Well, we were unpacking some the other day, and we found a whole box of a neat print of John Lewis's house. John Lewis being the example of our first settler. He was one of he and his family were one of the first settlers that came here from the north of Ireland. And this is a drawing done by Roscoe Meiselhorn, if anybody knows who that is. I vaguely remember years ago someone donating a box of these to us, and then they got packed up, and so we found them. So we brought 3 of them today, and John Lewis is important not only because he's kind of representative of one of the first settlers of Augusta County, but his son, Thomas Lewis, was a surveyor, and he's the one that laid out the map of the city of Stanton, the first map of the city of Stanton. So it ties in directly. But for the first 3 new members today, they'll also get one of these prints. So that's a little bit of incentive, and we have brochures over this side. This is the free side, and this is the sales side. So you can take the brochure from the free side and go over and pay on the sales side. But what we have in the back, we have a number, not all of our books for sale, but a number of our books for sale, which are important in getting out the story about Augusta County, but also in the sales, kind of supporting the efforts that we do with the society. And then over here we have, Donna's going to tell you, our archivist, Donna Helfer, is going to tell you a little bit more about our wonderful 18th century compasses that tie right into this talk today. And then we have our membership brochures, our driving map. We also have a stack of books of the Free Black Register of Augusta County. So those are free for you to take with you. We have a few extras. And so that's over there. One other plug that I want to give, and it ties in with the membership somewhat, is we can't do what we do without volunteers. And we're really trying to, one of our board members, Sheila Ahmadi, is really trying to work on getting our membership, our volunteer group up and going and getting them organized, giving them levels of perks for however many volunteer hours. But we have a great need for volunteers to sit in the library and welcome visitors who come in and help them do research with Augusta County history, whether it's in our library or in the archives. Volunteers directly with Donna, our archivist, about processing collections. We have an exciting new program that's ongoing. It's called the Augusta Community Portal. If you go onto our website, you'll see a little blue icon with a keyhole in it. You click on that. That unlocks your virtual access to Augusta County history. And there's a list there now. Almost all of our bulletins that we've published since the early 1960s are now scanned and online. There are records that are being scanned and online, and links to other places where you can go to, like, the Library of Virginia, to Augusta County's Chancery Court records, and that'll open you up to about 750,000 documents that are virtual. So this virtual access is never going to end. We have 2 nice scanners now. We have people who are scanning all the time, but those scanners are available 24/7, and we need volunteers to keep scanning, and the more they can scan, the more we can put up virtually. We're working with James Madison University's Histories Along the Blue Ridge, which is virtual access to the history of the valley, to make all that happen. So we have that need. We have need for people who have strong backs, because we have a lot of books and donations of things that we need moved from place to place. Right now we're storing, this is an interesting little bit of trivia that might help you at a party sometime to keep conversation going. We've published a lot of books, thousands of books and bulletins every year since the 1960s. We have a lot of extra copies of those. Right now, there's not enough room in the Smith Center for those. So right now they're stored in the old Augusta County jail cells. Over in the brick building across from the district court building. So that building is something's going to happen to that real soon. It's going to be torn down and what, but we have to get the books out of jail, which books are kind of heavy, and so they have to go down 2 floors to someone's pickup truck and then be moved. So we always need volunteers with good backs and good pickup trucks. And then volunteers who can help in the office, stuff envelopes, or if you have a real affinity for mail merge and databases, to help our office staff do that. So, and even for special events, to do planning and help with putting up exhibits, designing exhibits. If you like to write, we can use writers and layout person people if you'd like to do that for our bulletin and our newsletter. So all kinds of volunteers. Let us know if there's something in particular you'd like, or I'm going to funnel it to Sheila, and then we'll very shortly, I would say within a few months, we'll have this program up and going in a real way, and we can get you in there to help us tell the story of Augusta County. And I'm going to now turn it over to Donna Huffer, because she has something real special to tell you about our archives and compasses, but then another special project that she's been working on. And don't forget the prints, first 3.
Hello, I'm Donna Huffer. That's
Pull the mic closer.
hello. Hello. Take it. Okay. I'm Donna Huffer, the archivist. I have brought today 2 Charles Homestead compasses. There's only 3 that we know of. And we're very lucky this year to get a second compass. Someone looked at our Facebook and our website and saw me talking about it. He called me up from Tennessee and said, "Hey, I got one. Would you like it?" And I said, "Sure." And our problem was a problem trying to get it here from Knoxville, because we couldn't insure it, because we couldn't get a price on it. And so my brother-in-law, who lives in Knoxville, drove over to his house and bought it to us. So we have a second Charles Hogshead compass for free. So that's very nice. I don't know who has the 3rd one, but maybe we'll hear from them. Charles Hogshead lived outside of Parnassus, between Parnassus and Sterling Springs. There are still Hogshead family there. You may have seen the name as Hogshead. That's another way that the descendants will spell it. He was a surveyor from 1795 to 1801 in Augusta County. He liked to make his own compasses, and because he just liked to fool with metal. And he also sidelined as a dentist. He made his own dentistries. And so besides farming and surveying, he was well known as a dentist. And when he leaves Augusta County, that's what he'll take up in West Virginia, where he will die in 1830s. And that's what he was known for, the local dentist. These are very nice. They're silver and engraved. nice and very plain features on them. It's easy to read. We have, the first one we have works. The second one, unfortunately, does not. But, you know, it's 1797, what years? So, we recently, we'll talk about another project we have going here. We recently got, I know you can't see this, but we recently got a large oil painting of Elizabeth Hamilton Hogshead, second wife of Preston Hogshead, from the grocery store here in Stanton. Now she goes from 1838 to 1891. We don't know who painted this, but it's a great example of Augusta County art. Unfortunately, she has a hole in her ear. It's been punctured accidentally, and we would like to get it restored. And so I'm asking if anybody so inclined, I have a donation box back here just for this project. These are very costly to get these restored, but it's a brilliant. It's up in our gallery if you'd like to come see it. It's a very brilliant example that we don't want to lose for our artists.
Ray's behind you. He's fine.
What? Is there anything else?
That's good.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Don. As you can see, we have lots of exciting things going on at the Historical Society, but I'm ready to introduce our speaker now. It's Mr. Paul Parish, who lives in Middlebrook, which is a native of Mineral, West Virginia, and Mineral County, West Virginia, where he majored in civil engineering technology at West Virginia Tech and then joined the United States Air Force, and we thank you for your service. And after 4 years of service around the world, he worked as a construction engineer and then for the Cumberland, Maryland Fire Department, where he retired as a captain. Now, his interest in 18th century living history began way back in 1974 when he returned to civilian life. And he tacked on an expertise in colonial surveying beginning in 2002. So you've been at this for a good 20 years. And we're glad you're here, Mr. Parish. So I would like to introduce to you Mr. Paul Parish. Thank you very much.
Well, that was me you was talking about? Okay, everybody hear me pretty well?
We hope so.
Yeah, here we go. I'm really pleased to be here with you all. See some members of the Roritan Club that I belong to, some members of the General Daniel Morgan Sons of the American Revolution, which I also belong to. So there's all kinds of people there that know me and still showed up. So that's a pretty good thing. What I want to do is get into some of the surveying situations and requirements and everything that dealt with the surveying in the Shenandoah Valley and a little bit into Beverly Manor. I could spend 6 or 8 hours just on that. It's incredible the stuff that's in this wonderful Augusta County land records y'all got. I could go there and just stay for days and just look at this stuff. It's worth it to go there because what you're looking at is documents that somebody, what are you looking at, almost 300 years ago, actually touched, actually did. Some of it, some of the most important piece of paper they ever had in their life. So it's pretty interesting. It's really great Augusta County was able to maintain such a record. The history of the Shenandoah Valley is estimated that the Appalachian Mountains are somewhere around 350 million years old, give or take a couple of days. They believe that in some cases they're higher than the Andes, and some people say even higher than the Himalayas. And over the millennia, the erosion and the water and so on washed them down to what they are today. Still magnificent mountains, but they're nowhere near as high as they were, and the valleys filled in. These flat areas eventually gained vegetation, streams, that sort of thing, and finally the animals filled in. It's hard to believe nowadays that we actually have buffalo down here, we had elk down here, We had wolves down here, just all kinds of things. Also, what went on in this flatland is Native Americans would come in and burn patches of it out to chase the animals away, and also to build these greater meadows and stuff. So when the Europeans got here, they weren't looking at just a big flat land. They weren't looking at huge trees like you saw up in New England. They were looking at something that maybe just would be perfect to try to get occupied. And these paths that these animals walk, they work down and just, you know how the cows do today, you got all these little paths and all this, the one that leads to the milk house and feed shed, whatever. That's what these animals are doing too. It didn't take long for the Native Americans to use them as war paths and quick travel routes. And eventually it became such as a great wagon road and so on like that. So it's pretty interesting that just what nature did in Shenandoah Valley long before the Europeans showed up. Now what this map shows here, in 1606, Edward I granted all this land here between the 34th parallel, which is here, all the way up to 41st to the Virginia colony. The other two were proprietary colonies. The London company headed there, and the Plymouth colony headed to the north. That's an entirely different story itself. But the neat part about it was that this extended out here 100 miles into the Atlantic Ocean. Hey, all right. And it said it went to the Virginia Sea. How many of you have ever seen Virginia Sea? I have no idea where it's at. They didn't either. They thought maybe about the Mississippi River. Nah. When they got to the top of some of those other mountains further west, they got out there, we got a long way to go. If you look at an old map of Virginia, it looks like a map today without the states in it. Very, very, very great distance. The first known explorers who came here, there were several others before. They were people who came in here and they just plopped down and they built their little houses and all like that. Completely illegal. No ownership, legal ownership or anything like that. But these two people here are probably the most well-known of the three explorers that had any influence on the Shenandoah Valley. The first one is Michel, was a Swiss fellow, and he came in here. He wanted to build with a couple of friends of his. He was Swiss. They wanted to start a new Swiss colony. And he was going to call it Bern, B-E-R-N. So he comes in here and he's parading all over the place. He's got all these lines and stuff going around here. Note the compass roads there. North is to the right. Most of the maps of that time period, for some reason, north was always to the right, not to the upper like we're used to doing today. But some of these things, he made this Massanutten Mountain here. Here was supposed to be the Alleghenies and all like that. I'm not really sure what he was drawing. Other thing that makes out, this is the Great Falls of the Potomac. Here's some islands in the Potomac. Here could be his representation of the Shenandoah, which would eventually become the Shenandoah, and then wandered further up into the west area. He wasn't very successful with his plans to build the Bern, but he went to a place down in the Carolinas and built a place down there called New Bern. John Lederer, he was a 17th century German physician, and Sir William Berkeley, who was at that time the governor of Virginia, rural governor of Virginia, wanted him to explore the Appalachians. So he sent him down south because that's where all the disturbances were going on. And he made 3 excursions up along the Appalachians, the Blue Ridge especially, up this way. His intent was to find some kind of a path across from the flatlands to the east or the Blue Ridge into the Shenandoah Valley. He did find one passage that he liked, and he was one of the first persons to see the Alleghenies and the Shenandoah Valley. These monuments here are in place today near Linden, Virginia, is where they estimate that he actually set up his observations from. Neat thing about this, I'm going to say probably late last fall, Sons of the American Revolution did a grave marking down at the first house that was believed to have been built on this side of the Blue Ridge. And it's there today. It's owned by the same people. It's always owned it, and people live in it today, and the owner's grave is there. So we did a big ceremony there to mark him. He was a Rev War patriot, of course. But you can go find these near Linden, Virginia. The next fellow here, Governor Spotswood, he seemed to be an adventure. He seemed to be a little bit different to me than some of the other governors of Virginia, because they seem to be rather sit on the porch and watch and go out and do things, I guess. So he sent a party of rangers all over the place to try to find a passage across the Blue Ridge. The problem was they wanted people to come across there, but they were afraid to come over. Number one, it was difficult to get over, and who was living over this side of the Blue Ridge? These people with arrows and things like that, and no real security, so perhaps they didn't want to go. So he found one, these rangers found one in 1716. This varies from source to source. Between 12 and 60 men went up to Swift Run Gap, which is up on the mountain there. And from there, they descended down the mountain into the Shenandoah. They called the Shenandoah then the Euphrates. They had a big party down there for 4 or 5 days, drinking every king and ever had and so on like that. And they finally come back and they presented their findings to the colonial government. And one of the things he did, he had these little golden horseshoes made with little diamonds on them and given to the members of his party. And he called them the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, and engraved on them some Latin words. Please forgive me because I speak West Virginia, not Latin. Sic juvat transcendere montes, which means thus it is pleasant to cross the mountains. In 1930, the state of West Virginia established a thing called the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe. Every year, the top 8th grade students in the top 8th grade West Virginia history class go to Charleston, and they are awarded one of these golden horseshoes. And it's been going on since 1930. It still goes on today. I didn't get it. Okay, now we talked about this land. Well, you got this land. What are you going to do with it? It's like a dog chasing a car. What do you do with it when you get it? First of all, these royal grants were given. This is it says from the king. Now, what he would do, his friends would come up and say, "Hey, how about giving him a few 100,000 acres?" "Oh, sure, go right ahead. What do you want?" You saw the map before. He had no idea what he's giving away. Between 34 and 41 latitude, you're running into conflicts with California. Yeah, with North Carolina. When you go north, you're dealing with the problems of Pennsylvania and Maryland like that. He didn't care. He's just giving this stuff away. And that's how basically a lot of the land grants that over in the eastern part of Virginia came into effect. These places over there that one person held over 300,000 acres. 250,000 acres here, 300,000 acres there. What are you going to do with it? It's mine. I guess that's the only thing we do. Finally, he got to the point and said, "No, you've got to stop this. You've got to do something." So one of the first things that came about was a thing called head rights. What that meant was, if you managed to find your way, a certain time in this process anyway, if you managed to find your way to Virginia or some of the other colonies, and you paid your own way and all like that, you could get 50 acres for doing that. And if you brought your wife, another 50 acres, another kid, and all like that. So you could get 400 acres or so off of head rights. Or, the nasty part was, I could pay your way here, and I would get your head rights. Which meant that I would get all the land, and what do you get? you're getting a piece of paper called an indenture, which means that you're going to be working for me for 5, 6, 7 years, maybe longer than that. In some cases, some of the worst conditions a human being can work in, even as bad as the slavery was. Many of the indentured servants had it just as bad. But I'm getting it. The only thing I had to do when your indenture was over was give you some clothes and some tools. So what are you going to do now? Some of these people went over the mountains and all like that, took up residence, which wasn't legal, but at least they went there. After a while, I got to the point that treasury rights, where you could pay for ridiculous prices. Think of this: 10 shillings for 100 acres. Wow. Just about anybody could afford it. The only thing you had to go through the process to get it. And now things are starting to get good with an outright purchase. This is what Beverly did with Beverly Manor for the most part. He sold a lot of it. Some of it he leased out, which is what the lease process was for people who couldn't afford to buy it. Some of the records I've seen, he's charged as much as 20 shillings for 300 acres, or 2 shillings for 100, or more than that. But then a lot of leases I've seen in there too, and it's a wonderful thing down there to stand. A lot of these leases were for like 3 generations. And one of the things you had to do, especially in Beverly and some of the others, was pay some type of honorarium to the landowner. And they would be things like an ear of corn, or a bushel of corn, or a cow, or an Indian error. And I'm going, where are you going to get that? You pull out your buddy that went to the wrong place. But sometimes they just had this little symbolic thing. And most of the time that was to be paid on Lady Day. Does anybody know what Lady Day is? It's March the 5th. Yeah, your birthday. How much it cost? You're going to see here in a little bit how much some of it was. These people said, we can't afford that. So they come down through here. That's how my ancestors ended up over in the South Branch Valley. Sneaking down through there and finding some piece of land. Down through Lord Fairfax's 5.25 million acres and down into there, just over the land. So they stayed there. Sometimes they moved on. And the so-called tomahawk survey meant nothing. The only thing it was, you knew what land you wanted. Because unless this land had been the fees paid on it, the survey done on it, listed in the land office of wherever you were, that tomahawk survey meant nothing. There was a young man by the name of Daniel Boone. He had over 12,000 acres in Kentucky. But he lost because he refused to have it surveyed. But he was a surveyor. I don't know. Here's what Beverly Manor looks like, more or less. Some of you are quite familiar with some of that. This particular map here was done to list some of the major houses of worship there. But you can see it's very odd shaped. About 118,200 some acres. When you consider 640 acres in a square mile, he had a pretty good chunk of land there. It's roughly about 28 miles as long as length and about 7 miles at its widest. It encompasses all kinds of things. A lot of streams and so on like that, mountain ranges, and you notice these trails going through there. They were marking this church as well. So that's a pretty good hunk of land that he got. This is an interesting piece of equipment, or a piece of stone. Did anybody ever seen this? Well, tomorrow morning you're going to have to go down to the courthouse and stand and look at this. It's inside the side of the door where the jury members go in. This is the first corner monument that they could recover in the first survey that was done for Lord Fairfax, Beverly's survey. It was said on about the 5th course at the end of the first day, it says. And it was located right up in there, somewhere. Some other maps give you an idea where this is, but they started, let's see, right about here. And run the line up to that. Run up, over, back there. In 1906, a fellow found it. And what am I going to do with it? So he takes it down to the courthouse. And it was at the end of the first days. This plaque is a marble plaque up on the wall above it. And it tells when it was recovered and all like that, and when it was first set. And in August of 1934, 36, there was a newspaper article in the Stand newspaper about everything that the guy did to try to find it. But it's pretty neat. The stone itself, when you look at it, you can see a circle scratched in it, and maybe the remains of a bead which was put on it to mark it as being part of the Beverly line. So it's pretty interesting they've got such a thing as that. Most of the rest of them, who knows where they're at. But this fellow spent a whole lot of time trying to find this thing, and he eventually did. Okay, let's get into the real thing of what we need to talk about today. In order for the land to be owned, you could possess it. It had to be surveyed. You had to pay the fees on it, get it registered, and using the same methods and equipment that have been used in England forever. This is what our surveyors did over here. They had it a whole lot easier in England because they had nice flat ground and not a lot of trees because they burned up half their trees and made ships out of the rest, so there wasn't a lot of trees there. But the first thing, and I've mentioned this word several times, what's an acre? Well, an acre is supposedly the amount of ground a man and 2 oxen could plow in a day. Who cares about the man and oxen if you've got to rest? They believe possibly the word itself may be Germanic, but nobody really knows. An acre is 4 poles wide. Wait a minute. Nothing on that. And 40 poles long, which means it covers an area of 160 square poles, or an area of 43,560 square feet, which is just shy of an area of American football field. To give you an idea of how big an acre is. It seems like a little bit. But what's it got to do with pole? No, it's not somebody from Poland. It's not the North Pole, South Pole. Let's find out here in a second. The pole. It can be an object, such as a pole, or a unit of measurement. That's sort of making sense. You needed some form of measuring device to lay this ground out and get the size of it like that, to be of consistent dimension, paste it off and that sort of thing. This was not going to be accurate enough for what we needed to do. So, since a rod or a pole with some significant length was needed to control the team of oxen, why not use it to measure distance in the area? Well, it all depends on how big the pole is. The dilemma was how to make it a consistent width. For centuries, body parts, or human body parts, were used as measurement devices. You know, the cubit, the span, and all the other things like that were used in biblical times. I'm sure Will Chamberlain's cubit was much bigger than mine would be. So, how accurate is that going to be? It's close enough for what they were doing, not enough for what we wanted to do. There's too many variations among the individuals to make it consistent measurements. And there seemed to be a real inconsistency how many feet was in a pole. It varied between 15 and 20 feet. Now, if you're out there measuring land, that's a significant difference. So the popular legend, I'm sure you all heard this, all over the country here, we use the dimension of in England, we use the king's foot. Now, I am sure that George III, Bonnie Prince Charlie, or even Elizabeth I is going to come out to your muddy old field and pace it off so you can measure something based on their feet. I don't think so. Because look at the difference in the feet. Bonnie Prince there, he's got some strange little feet in the painting anyway. This is the funny part, I just showed you into Germany. This guy named Kohl wrote the land measure about him, and he came up with this one. On a Sunday morning, as church is let down, ask 16 men as they exit to stand with their left feet lined up heel to toe. All right. You can remember what their shoes look like? Some of them have very big long toes and stuff on them. So, by using them in various heights and like that, the total length of their feet will be the length of the pole, and 1/16 of that was a foot. Okay, that's what I'm measuring this Sunday. Next Sunday, it's going to be different. Different people's going to be there. So, but at least it was a start of trying to be consistent about something. And there's how they do it. I don't know whether they're going in or going out, but obviously, I guess if they were going to church, they were honest people with their feet. I don't know. Anyway, but we got to do something more standard than that. So when the Normans took over England, away from the Saxons and all like that, there been prior estimates of trying to do consistent. But what they come up with was standards for bushels and gallons and all kinds of things, weights and measures like that. And one of the things they come up with was how to define a foot so that you could go out wherever you were practically and measure yourself a foot, and you didn't have to have Queen Elizabeth or George III come down and help you. So what they did, they come up with 3 barley corns. Y'all know what barley is. 3 corns that end to end was an inch. 12 inches with 36 barley corns was a foot. The yard is 3 feet, and the pole became 5.5 yards or 16.5 feet. About 1.25 inches shy of being exactly 5 meters. How that worked out, who knows, but anyway. Now, everybody in this room probably has dealt with this at one time or other, because this right here is the basis of the modern shoe sizing. So, the thing you put your feet in to measure the size of your feet goes clean back to England when they were trying to figure out how to make a standard foot. Resulting dimensions in a pole, 16.5 feet. You'll also see a term called a rod, which is the same thing. You will sometimes read it as a perch, not a fish, but a perch. It uses a unit of dimension. But a perch technically is not a unit of length. It's an area, a measure of area. A furlong length is 40 poles or 660 feet, which is, for any of you all who have any interest in horse racing, that sort of thing, that's a furlong, right? It's 1/8 of a mile. And a mile is 320 poles, 5,280 feet. So here we're back there, that's how that acre came out to be 160 square poles. 66 feet wide, 660 feet long. Now, 2 things we deal with, meets and bounds. Basically what we do is how far something goes and in what direction. The land tracts are distance and direction. Distance measured in poles, which came some issues early in the colonial. The direction is, of course, not written here, not like a sailing or flying a direction. It's got a specific way it's written like that. And the monument is to a wild cherry tree or whatever may be out there. That stone we looked at, that was considered a monument. They come back to the end. They sat down at the end of the first day. They come back the next day, picked up at that point, and took on surveying the rest of it. So that's look at the tools of the trade. You mentioned the 2 compasses back there and the chain back there. Yep, they were the ones they used. Determine your direction. direction with reference to magnetic north, because all these compasses, mine included, think they know where magnetic north is. As you may know, magnetic north wanders around all over the place. The compass is known as a plane compass or circumferential. We'll talk about that in a minute. The course is both described. The navigation course is in degrees, or compass readings for land surveys is how many degrees that line is running to east or to west of the pole direction, the north or the south. The navigation, for example, navigation course there would be 139 degrees, so you look at your compass, you're not going to take 180 degrees, which would be south, but you go a little bit to the east. The same line would be 41 degrees south, 41 degrees east. Okay, what I have, my compass, is an English compass. It was made in 1770 by a man named Sir Edwin Nairn. He was an instrument maker to King George III. He's also friends to Benjamin Franklin. And his best thing he did in his whole working life, he invented the rubber pencil eraser. Many things like this, but so either one or two things. He made a lot of mistakes, or he knew a lot of people that did. So he made these beautiful instruments made out of glass. This thing still works. I have the original glass, the original silvering on the face, and everything like that. This is what you're going to see when you look at the ones back there. This is the American face. There's just a little bit of difference in them. And some people go, oh, that's something the matter with that compass. Whoever made it didn't know what they were doing. Yes, they did. Explain that in this. Now this is a fancy one. This one was made more or less after a nautical compass. Early surveying in the 1600s used these, and it's just a beautiful thing, very difficult to use for land surveying. If you go into New England, where they were very stingy, didn't like to spend a lot of money on it, they made their own wooden compasses. They carved the thing out, magnetize the needle, then go down to the ship's chandler, which is like the Walmart for sailing ships, and they buy themselves a compass rose, set it in that thing, and that's what they made. I made one myself a few years ago when we moved down here. I lost part of it, had no idea where it went, so I didn't bring it. So. Compass staffs, there's two of them. One of them is a staff like that, just a single pole, which works the Jacob staff, which works very well in rough ground or whatever. You want to move really quick, you're going on pretty good. The only problem is it's a little unstable, you don't really get accurate readings on it. And the other one is a three-legged staff like this. It's not called a tripod until the end of the 19th century. A three-legged staff. It's more stable, you can be more accurate with it, but it takes a little bit longer to set up because you notice the legs are not adjusted. The only thing you can do is move the legs out back and forth. Sometimes that can be real fun. Now, I said the compass knows where it thinks magnetic north is. Magnetic north wanders around all over the place. Right now, it's in the western part of the Yukon, and it's heading toward Siberia. It's related to the movement of some of the stuff inside the earth, below the mantle and all the stuff that's in there. And for some reason, this movement in about the past 8 years is increased by about something like 20%. So who knows, but by the time the next generation grows up, magnetic north maybe over Russia somewhere. So, but the inclination is a difference between what the compass reads and what true north is. Not that it makes that big a difference, perhaps. The only thing is, if I take my compass and run a line and come back 15 years from now and use one of those compasses back there, I don't know what the declination of those two compasses are. So if I'm having it written down as true north, then I can adjust my compass. Virginia said by 1773 they had enough of this crack and said, you know what? You're going to do all the surveying by true north. I still hear there's old surveyors laughing. You want us to do what? Of course, the survey they were doing back in the 1700s, how long do they think that was going to last? A generation perhaps? The biggest thing of concern they had was two of them. One was making sure they stayed on the North American continent, and the second was they got paid for it. That's pretty much it. They really didn't need all this accuracy because most of these compasses couldn't even adjust it. 5 degrees, 20 minutes, 30-some seconds, which is some of the differences. Now there's a compass maker up in Winchester by the name of Shanley, Goldsmith Shanley, and several others. I don't know if the guy down here did or not. They made it so you could adjust your compass to compensate for the declination. That's it. So, here's my compass. When I set it up, I'm sighting down like this. That's what the red line indicates. The line down across the face of my compass in the direction I'm going. You see that it goes north and south. I always set my compass up so I'm reading across the fleur-de-lis in the direction I'm going. You see the needle over here. I've set my compass up, let it stabilize, let it swing free, and it sits there. That is magnetic north. The difference between here and here is what my course is going to be. In this case here, it's north, I think it's something like 38 degrees. And east, wait a minute, this is north. How can this line here be east? I always had to remember to read the opposite, east and west. Kind of confusing, I know. Because if I wrote this course down as north so many degrees east, it's going this way, not that way. So using the English compass, you have to be really, really careful about doing that. But Americans do what they learn. And you'll see on these compasses back there. Look what they did with the east and the west. Reversed them on the compass face. So that way, wherever your line fell, it's north so many degrees west, so many degrees east, and something like that. And that was farmed into the, at least the 20th century, on the surveyor's compass, the engineer compasses. You'll see that over there. The first time I saw one, I thought, something's not right here. But my survey instructor that I had for 3 semesters, I actually believe he drove the chain from Washington. He was that old, and he was so good at surveying. He explained that to me, made sense, but sometimes it doesn't. So you want to really get down into doing stuff and get this pretty quick. There's several ways to determine declination. As a colonial surveyor out here, I'm not interested in it, but anyway, I can do it. There's ways of going out there and studying the stars and seeing where they've been holding plumb bobs and stuff and watching the wobble of Polaris and all this stuff. And when you got to do that, you've got to do that at night. So you're not going to do that. The easiest way, if you really want to do it, if the sun comes out tomorrow, run out in your backyard and do this. Stick yourself up a vertical pole in the ground sometime before noon, and the sun is going, if it shines, is going to cast a shadow across it. And you draw yourself an arc on the ground at that distance. Then you go back to the tavern and sit down. And you watch as the sun moves around, and eventually the sun is going to come around from the other side and cast another shadow. You draw this line between there and halfway point between them, that's true north. But what good is that going to do with your compass? You only read in degrees. Yep. Are you satisfied with the requirement for Virginia? Now, that tells you how you get the direction. Remember, the direction is north or south, so many degrees east to the west. The reason they do that is based upon a mathematical process used to calculate land distance. It's called the D&D method, and I'm not going to go over that with you because it is way too complicated. Our last semester in college or final was something like a 27 course survey. We had all mathematically calculate that out. Those were calculators and computers. Okay, remember we said the chain was two things. It could be an object or a dimension. The chain's dimension is 66 feet or 4 poles. A fellow by the name of Dr. Gunner in England in the 1760s, he decided he was going to standardize all that. From that time on, everything was measured in chains. But when the surveyors came to the colonies, the gunner's chain was 100 links. Looked like that. Looked like that. Looked like the one back there. Called this thing the devil's guts, by the way. You gotta have a name for everything. They found it dragging a chain with 100 links in it, 66 feet long. There were kinds of briars and rocks and who knows what else. Just wasn't all that practical. So they started using what this is a half chain, 33 foot. So when they started marking down the distances, remember they were using initially the chains. What chain was they using? A 66 footer or a 33 footer? If you didn't note that, someone wasn't going to figure it out very well in the end. So they started using the poles. So a 33-foot chain is 2 poles. The 66 footer is 4. And if you really want to get accurate, is the length. The subunit of the chain, there's 100 links in gunner's chain, 50 in American, 25 links to a pole. On the chain, you will see tally tags that go from each end. This is 10 links. And the next one has 2 forks on it. There's 20 links and so on like that. If you're going to do really closely, I have never seen an 18th century survey yet that was in anything with whole poles. This was often used, military uses quite a bit for accuracy, for measuring distance from gunfire and so on like that. This thing here is 7.92 inches long. Handmade. How accurate do you think that puppy's going to be? Here's the tally tags. Few surveyors use less than whole poles. So here you are out there crawling around with rocks and bars and everything. On this side of the Blue Ridge, just having a wonderful time surveying your line out, and you break your chain. What do? Well, very simply, I'll go down to the blacksmith, have him make me a new set of links. And then there's blacksmith probably over in Joanna someplace. So guess what? You're just going to put it together. So you're automatically about 8 inches short than what you should be. Who knows how many survey chains had multiple links broke out of it. They just put them together and just kept going. Each one of those points in the thing, wear points. A couple of friends of mine figured it out one time. In the course of one survey season, you could lose, I think they calculated like a 16th of an inch wear of those things. And I forget what they said the inaccuracy of the thing would be, but it would make the chain up to 8 inches longer than it started out to be. It's kind of like the slack in the railroad car in training. You know, a long time, the engine's moving a long time before the back car moves, that sort of thing. This thing here wasn't too common used in land surveying in Virginia. It's primarily used for military applications, but there's a plane table and you could get distances. The only thing you need to do is set your table up, level it, get a direction, say on something prominent far distance away, measure distance, 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever, and move it down. And repeat those angles and you can do all kinds of nice stuff with it. This famous picture here is known as the two Pauls and the two Dans. We were surveying the Fort Frederick using the plane table, and I forget what all we did, but when we got back and physically checked it with another method called tape measure, we were within 6 inches of what we started out to be. So it is accurate if you're careful. There you can see what they're doing there. They started here, sight on these different mountains here, moved this fixed distance, and then went that way and that way. And by knowing this distance here, and these angles here, you can calculate how far in those other points are. It's made it really good for military. Okay, these are the tools we use to get it. I'll tie myself up here. The way you go about getting land, unless you're somebody like the Beverleys, the Berkeleys, whoever, you just don't go, hey King, I need some land, or hey, Governor Spotswood, another spot with a few 100,000 acres. You had to make a request. It was called an entry. An entry is a request for a grant release for a certain tract of land. These are the ones, some of the ones out of Lord Fairfax's land use. But down here, they're pretty much similar. You'll see that they were put in an entry book by the appointed surveyor, using the county surveyor. And they indicate a location where this land would be and an estimated area. The estimated area is for you to be able to figure out what it's going to cost you to get it. And it was put in the land office for further record or whatever until the surveyors instantly give it a warrant. The warrant assigned the surveyor to go out someplace, survey a certain tract of land. This affirmed that the person who was getting it had the money to pay for it, where it was supposed to be, and something like that. And one of the last things they did, they told me how long we had to do it, usually 60 to 90 days. This one was given to one Mr. George Washington, and it was from Lord Fairfax's land agent, who was his nephew, Edward, I think it was. So the surveyor has this piece of paper now. Okay. A lot of times they try to get these surveys contiguous so that you're going out and measure land together. And it's not going to be a hodgepodge of things all over the place. If you look at some of the track map of this is what it looked like about 1756 or something like that of Beverly Manor. This has all the land tracts, names of it. And you see many of them are quite side by side. The surveyors like to go out and survey 2 or 3 in the same spot because you only had to run about half the lines. The ones between them and all like that. So that was something to do. The track configuration is supposed to be a general shape of the track. It's supposed to be nearly as possible a parallelogram, 3 to 4 times as long as it was wide. You keep it nice little squares, like it was in England. Ain't going to happen over here because of all the rocks and everything else about it. You just can't survey it like that, but they try. One of the things this was supposed to do is keep people from doing what's called a shoestring survey, which meant they got a whole bunch of land down along the riverfront. And they go down there a mile, mile and a half, and only have 60 to 100 feet back from it. That way, they got all the shipping area and all kinds of things like that. It wasn't that common, but it was getting to be pretty much a pain down in the eastern part of the state. Also, it's supposed to make the control of land easier. You can weigh out the patents easier. But when you look at these things here, it's very, very seldom you see anything that comes close to any type of a square, parallelogram, or anything like that. You know, kind of look at dog's breakfast just laying there. Here's some of the stuff that the different colonies and all like that required. Connecticut and other New England areas only granted a few acres at a time. It's considered community land. So you could have a couple, 4 acres of your own, but that was pretty much it. Some colonies required the cultivation of at least 1 acre, some of them 3. And the construction of a small building, usually about 18 by 20 or something like that. A lot of times these people would get these land grants and just barely do that in a year. It reserves. They had 3 years to do this. Lord Fairfax didn't require that, though. He didn't really care. Maryland required every grant or survey to have a distinctive name. When I looked at some of the archives in Annapolis there several years ago, it was really fun looking at this. Some of them like Pleasant Valley, Smoky Ridge, Turkey Flight Manor, and then you got the others like Dung Hill. The one I like the best of them all, not worth a damn. If it was, why do you want it? But just some of the peculiarities of this Pennsylvania, what's this sound like? Deducted 6% of the acres for roads and highways. Right-of-ways back in the 1700s. Whether a road or anything ever went through there or not, didn't make any difference. 6% of that land belonged to Pennsylvania regardless. In Virginia, the northern neck proprietary of Fairfax as well as Beverly Manor, fees were typically 10 shillings per 100 acres. Maryland had similar costs, but look what Pennsylvania came up with. 15 pounds. There's 20 shillings in a pound. So over here you're getting half a pound per 100 acres, and here you're paying what? 4, 5, 6 times how much it leased. Beverly charged much less. Like I said, looking at these records here, and you see all kinds of things. I think some of it had to do, some of these lands were improved a little bit, some of them were. These fees went to the northern neck, Lord Fairfax, some went to the land offices, and the ones in Virginia, of course, went to the land office down in Williamsburg. They were registered in the counties, and that's what you're going to find up in the Augusta courthouse. All these wonderful deeds that the surveyors did, and then the records were recorded into the land records. This is supposed to be George Morris's one of his surveys. If you look at that chain, it looks like a long chain as opposed to the thing I got here. I have no idea what this thing here is, but whoever wrote it didn't. So what you would do, I'm a surveyor now, I've got a warrant, I know where I want to go, I locate this place, I establish my line directly his pilot, his axemen, and his chainmen, make a line. The names of the chainmen were entered on an awful lot of the plats submitted. Curiously, many of the surveyors' names weren't. Because these were the guys that were responsible for the actual accuracy in the distance. So if something didn't work out, you're going to come back and find out who was one of the chain carriers and go from there. Many of the chain carriers, however, were members of the family that get surveyed for. The chainmen had to be free. It shows you the mentality in the 1700s. They had to be free men, no women, there'd be no slaves, no convicts, nothing. So some people made a career of being chainmen. Up in the part of West Virginia where I come from, Washington did a fair amount of surveying up there as well as a couple other surveyors. They used the same chainmen all the time. And they knew exactly what to do. It's a little hard to get a couple of guys that the only thing they know how to do is hoe a row of corn, pick tobacco boards off the tobacco crop, how to pull a chain properly. So one of the things they're supposed to do is read this oath, Some surveyors had to do this, some did. They basically said that they're swearing an oath that they're going to be accurate, truthful, and honest about their dragging the chain. Most of the surveying was done in late fall up to hard winter. When winter broke, surveying resumed until the budding out. That way the insects, the snakes, the leaves, and all that were greatly reduced, even though sometimes when it was real, the true Indian summer was usually coming in December, early January. Some of the Shawnee like that from the west would come in too. And they didn't like surveyors too much. They called that thing there land steal. So if they could do something to make our life miserable, they'd be glad to do it, because they knew when we come in, they was coming to harm them. This was largely because the sight lines were better due to the leaves and weeds being down for the most part. And typically, the woods and stuff at that time weren't near as thick as they are today. So you would go out, okay, I have my warrant. Where do you want this land to go from? Okay, well, this big rock, I want you to go here. So I set up here, and in my field book, I would write down, beginning at a large stone, in accordance with a warrant issued by such and such and such and such, and I would set off my direction. Here's what looking across my surveyor, my compass would look like, and I'd head my crew head down that way. I would note the course, north or south, so many degrees, east or west, and have them go, pulling the chain as they went. 33-foot jumps they were going. Each 33 feet, chain would stick a thing like this, either a stick or an arm peg in the ground. The back chain would come up to that and then move ahead, just leapfrog ahead. Every 10 chain lengths is called an out. And I would try to remember that, because 10 chain lengths would be 330 feet, and I'm sitting here looking at my book, and I'm looking at 330 feet. I'm doing pretty good there. So here we go, we're having a wonderful time out in the wonderful woods and like that. Take it across, it looks like a good place to run that line from that rock, okay? And this is what I would put in my book. Beginning at a point by a lane, that lane may have been one that I surveyed last year, north 76, west 58 poles, to a white oak on the edge of a wood. And I would note things like fine soil and grass, or a lot of mud, or whatever conditions may be there. And if it's very hilly, I was supposed to do what's called step chaining. All surveying is supposed to be done on the level. And that goes back to English times too, because these always said that if you went over a hill or you measure across the ground on a hill, that's not how crops grow. They don't stick out all over the place like a porcupine. They grow vertically. So what you do is you convert it to horizontal, which means if you own a mountain, you have more land area than you're charged for, because they only measure the base of it. The step chaining is one way to do this. You're just taking a chain, going so far. You had to be very skilled to do this. Took a lot of time to do it. Took a lot of time to do it. So how many surveyors do you think really did it? This shows you how complicated that can be. Here's the compass band. He's directing these guys up through there. We've already went over to here. This guy here is holding the upper end, the chain as best he can. Not very accurate at all. Our compasses had no real way of determining the vertical angle. If they did, it would have made this a whole lot simpler. Just get how the vertical angle is, then convert it to the horizontal and away you go. So it makes you wonder how accurate those lines were. You come to a stream. Well, this is the most common way of doing it. You're not going to measure each little turn of what you do in the stream. What you're going to do is a straight line, and you're going to mention it in your book, your field book. As a stream meanders. This is pretty important. especially in old surveys coming back to check things. Some of the surveys that Jen and Washington did up in Hampshire County and further like that, go back and look at these things where the South Branch River was then compared to now. It's moved as much as 100 yards in some places. Maybe it'll kind of big flood in 85. So this is pretty interesting. You can pretty much get an idea where a stream was, with how you're going to keep the river from changing. The chain of pins in the air that it showed, out, every 10 chain lengths was declared an hour. Surveyors had different ways to keep track of it. Some just use hash marks in the book, and some would put a stick in a waistcoat and move it down every buttonhole every time it was an hour. Some just didn't care. As I say, we went to the monuments. Okay, here we have a fork of pine. Yes, indeed. You read these surveys, and it sounds like Providence put trees exactly where these corners were going to be. No matter what they're going to be. That ain't so. Even though it says to a fork in a tree, that actual point might be out there 10, 15 feet. Where that last even chain mark was, it comes close to what I want the line to be, that's going to be it. But what they would do, they would mark blaze trees as they were going down, or boundary trees, put a mark on some type. If you get to a corner, you put 2 or 3 blazes on it. And this would be where you're going to turn. And then these trees around here and some down in here, they put a blaze mark on it facing that tree. That's called a witness tree. That way, 10 years from now, you can go back and find at least where that tree was. Because you think the trees are going to be there now? Probably not. And you proceed to go all the way around. You write down the types of trees. A buttonball tree is a sycamore. The Spanish oak, I looked all over the place trying to find out what Spanish oak is, because the Spanish oak to me is in things like down in Louisiana, a lot of stuff hanging off on them. It turns out that was another name for a red oak. And then the mitten tree. Everybody should know the mitten tree. The frass tree, because it's got 3 different kinds of leaves on it. One of them looks like a mitten. Stream crossings, roads, adjacent property names, all that stuff is recorded. And you go around back to the beginning. Sometimes this last line wasn't actually surveyed, it was just drawn in. And then he did the final thing, which is called the casting up. This one he's drawing up they have a nice little drawing something like this. This is mine. It was made in 1780 in London by a man named John Bluer, and his address is 29 Sudbury Lane, London. So if you want to go see him, that's his address. He might not be there. But they draw up all these things, typically making 3 of them, so they could make probably somebody working in the house and here it is. Think of things like that. This is an actual 1762 plat from Pennsylvania. And from what's on that thing, I could probably go up and find out where that was. Because he did a good job of identifying the stream and all like that. The area was supposed to be within 5% of the original allowance. There were mathematical ways to do the areas, like I mentioned, EMD and all like that. And that's way beyond the typical colonial surveyor. It's easy to figure an area if it's land is the area, triangle, or parallelogram. And you can look at all these oddball shapes, like here in Beverly Manor, for instance. Graphic methods were easier. They would draw the thing up. Each one of these is a course in the distance, all the way around. Draw this to scale. Then break it up into squares rectangles and triangles, figure the individual areas of each one, and add it up. This particular one added up to 488 acres. So that's what that was the number that did. This one here figured up 426 acres. By going 216 poles, 219, I think it's 81, around like that. So it's a fair distance you had to cover. The Pennsylvania method was kind of neat, where you drew your plot, and then on a scale, on a line here, so much per foot, whatever, and figured the individual areas like that. By all advance, Pennsylvania is really good at that. Us Virginians, we didn't do that. Here's what a plat looks like, same as this one I got here. And any of you look at this one here in particular, you'll find pinholes in each of the corners. And that's when he was making the copies of them. It was kind of like the 18th century Xerox. Put 3 pieces of paper down, punch holes in the corners, and then draw the lines. You think I'm going to get my protractor out and redraw this thing 3 times? Nah, not hardly. These would be entered in, be taken down to the land office, like the ones the old forest lumber you can see down in the Stanton. And this is how the plat. A stream survey was just simply do a line between 2 points. You didn't have to run another line. Sometimes surveys weren't even done in the field. In case of this happened, the guy just sat there and made it up. He was saying that caused problems when he's somewhere else. Then finally, this is what you find in the deed books down in the Stanton. This is the final thing that says, yes, this is yours. Sometimes you'll see the surveyor's name on there, the chain carriers. Sometimes the surveyor's not. This here's one from Lord Fairfax. But this, beyond a doubt, is the most important piece of paper many of these people ever had. Because when they give them ownership of a hunk of land, no way could they have owned this in Germany or France or England or anything like that. And this little piece of paper and some of this stuff started this little thing called the American Revolution. People say, I own 400 acres, you're not going to tell me what I got to do with it. And they say, you know, you're going to charge me tea, you're going to charge me 1763 proclamation. You couldn't go further than the Appalachians, or the Alleghenies, all that stuff like that. He was not going to sit very well with it. It tells you the description of land, the covenants, the quit rent payment. Quit rent payment was kind of like a property tax, and it was supposed to be paid on September the 29th, which is the feast day of St. Michael the Archangel. So we got Lady Day back in the corners, and now we got St. Michael here. So it was pretty impressive. Oh, by the way, the surveyor's patron saint's Doubting Thomas. Quit rents. We talked about these already. What did he pay him in? Corn, currency, which is difficult to get on this side of the mountain for quite a while. Pennsylvania, 1713 it was at 1 shilling, then went up 6 years later to 2 shillings, and then 13 years later, ½ pence per acre. They're really making money. Pennsylvania's really doing a good job there. They didn't barely call on to this. At least the world will be there. Virginia, the northern neck, and here in Shenandoah is usually 1 shilling for 50 acres. I discussed this here. The payment, when the average skilled worker made about $2 or 2 or 3 shillings a day, surveyor is a pretty lucrative career. You could make more money 6 to 10 times out of a skilled worker and only be in the field 5 to 6 months out of the year. Many made more money than a lawyer. In particular, we started out here with a fellow by the name of Preston. In Augusta County. And then he had another fellow by the name of Lewis. Now, I happen to know for a fact there's a couple of relatives of Mr. Lewis in this very room right now. So, y'all didn't go far, did you? It was a pretty lucrative job if you could get it. Many of them were, the problem they had being paid with tobacco. Are you going to pay the surveyor with good tobacco or the stuff that's not worth throwing away? 300 or 400 pounds of tobacco. It was good stuff, 1 or 2 pence. Then you go to try to cash it out, and the guy goes, this is not even worth throwing away. You're doing that survey for nothing. So the surveyor's got to really, and the ministers at the same time started to say, we want to establish that before the tobacco that we get paid in is given to us, it has to go through the registry at the tobacco depots, which cut a bunch of that out. We much rather have money. George Washington says, on a good day, peace only is mine. That's 18 shillings. Which means that in our time, he's making, in their time, the equivalent of about $300, which is pretty good for 1740s, 1750s. And he did this quite a bit. Knowledge, skills, and so on like that. The woodsman, he had to be a good woodsman. A lot of surveyors, they couldn't do it very long. They just got old. You have to understand mathematics and geometry. A little astronomy is helpful too, especially to apply this declination thing. Be good physical condition. You need to have a good knowledge of the Native American tribes, where they are, what signs they leave behind, how they're going to react to you coming into the territory. Not so much in this portion of the Shenandoah, but you get further south and further west, they got a little upset from time to time. There was no formal education to be a surveyor. The college enrolled William and Mary when they were first formed. They, as part of their paperwork getting put together, was they were supposed to charge, to fund them, 6% of the money earned by the county surveyor. In this case here, and this would have been Lewis and Preston before. But few paid it. For what? You know, there's no school there. You don't go to William and Mary and learn to be a surveyor. Most learned their surveying through self-learning side of another surveyor, which is how Lewis learned from Preston and someone like that. George Washington learned with another county surveyor by the name of William Jim. A few were appointed county surveyors. Now this is the one to get. If you want to be a surveyor, this is the one. Because this is the big guy. Everybody else, for the most part, surveys, and you take credit for it. You make a lot of money not doing anything. It has much to do with actual surveying. Some did a few, but not all. George Washington, even though he's only 21 years old, was appointed surveyor, county surveyor of Culpeper, Virginia. The only reason he got it was political connection. He was no more qualified to be a county surveyor at the time than anybody, and he only held it for about 3 years. So political connections got you the job of a county surveyor. And you're sitting there going, oh, that's a pretty good landowner. While you're over there surveying that, cut me out of a couple 100,000 acres or whatever. Some surveyors went on to business, military, and political careers. A couple of them went on to become senators, congressmen, big time politicians in Augusta County in particular. This, to surveyors, is known as 3 surveyors and some other guy. Of course, Washington was a surveyor, that's well known. Thomas Jefferson, his dad was more of a surveyor than he was, but he did some surveying. And back here hiding in the back is Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know how he snuck in there. I guess it just fit. And Lincoln did a lot of surveying in these earlier days. So 3 surveyors and some other guy. So to sum it up, without going much further, William Beverly asked for about a tract of land over here, the one I showed you the picture, ended up to be almost 120,000 acres. And by 1756, he had granted or leased about 80% of it. So he was making a fine little bit of money off that land that was essentially given. Of course, I can't find anything that says anything about him having headlights or anything to it. They give you so many acres if you bring so many people in. And just south of here then came the Borden tract, which you all probably know as the Parish tract. And Borden got it down there, he started bringing the Irish immigrants in. Shenandoah Valley was settled by Germans for the most part. Some Scots-Irish came in. The Germans started to sneak in the northern end, but eventually found a way down. And that's why so many of them here have some relation to somebody on this map I have here, or something in the county records. And the records are really easy to use. The people that are fabulous to help you find anything you're looking for. So, in conclusion, my belief is often overlooked and misunderstood in the study of colonial America. The surveyor played a big role in reforming our country. We pulled a nation out of the wilderness. These people developed their own sense of independence and rightfully own their things, and being comfortable in their own skin to tell somebody sitting in a throne 3,000 miles away, I don't think I want to listen to you anymore. And that brought about this small disagreement in 1776, which ended in 1783, and guess what? We got our own nation. Surveys today are essentially done exactly the same way as far as courses and directions and like that, except you go out with a single station device, set it down, punch a couple of buttons, and go somewhere else, go back to your office, punch in a couple of things, and it calculates all the stuff. The surveyor today with his single station unit can probably do 5 times the surveys that a colonial surveyor and his team can do. But in the end, you read his survey and his report back, it will say north 68 degrees west, but you don't use poles and stuff anymore to be so many feet, hundreds of feet, and thousands. They're very, very precise. But that's pretty much mine. I want to thank you all for your kind indulgence and not throwing things at me and that sort of thing. And share with me one of your most valuable assets, that's your time. I was glad to do this, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parish, for the outstanding program. I'm sure you would like to answer a few questions from the audience, if that's all right. So if you have any questions for Mr. Parish, have at it.
Yes.
That was lovely. Thank you for this talk. You said that there was a new rule in Virginia that they had to use true north rather than magnetic north, but that nobody actually bothered to do that. I have yet to find a plat that says the declination. So in Augusta County, which north were they using those?
If they did, it was rare.
So it was probably magnetic north?
Most of it was probably magnetic. And unless, of course, again, I know in some places, something like some of the county courthouse, and they had a mark on a plaque or something like that, that would tell you where magnetic north or true north was. You could take your compass there and figure it out from there. What good that did, because you go down here another 20 miles. So, yeah, it gives you something to do when you're not don't have nothing to do. Yes.
I noticed in the research I've done in Richmond, a lot of those early streets were 33-foot wide, 66-foot wide. Was that something that was typical throughout Virginia, like when cities were set up?
Yes. Because, very simply, because of what they use to measure. 33-foot chain would give you a 33-foot road. 2 of them would give you 66. If they weren't using tape measures and things like that, then this is what they were using. That's why sometimes you find these little alleys that's 16 and a half foot wide. It's one pole. Yes.
Is that something in Virginia that they typically did?
Yeah, it seemed to point out throughout the colonies because they were all basically using the same measurement equipment and something like that. Yep.
A slide that says like your starting point is big rock, okay, understand direction and distance. How do you know the rock is the correct start?
Well, there's a couple of ways. You look around for something prominent, well, usually you walk here, or if you're surveying somebody who particularly wants that area, he may tell you to start there. Or maybe just, some of them won't even walk, sometimes you just kick a hole in the dirt and start from there. What would help out if you were doing particular surveys, or you've been back in, you'd surveyed that area before, you may find another point on the line that you can go with. Sometimes, and you can go back in 4 or 5 years and that rock be gone. As a matter of fact, they had a thing called procession, and every 4 years they would go out and walk all these property lines, just so they could be familiar with them, see if they're still there like that. And can you imagine how many trees and things like that fell down and whatever that other time? And that's why the witness trees are there. There's 5 witness trees that has to be here somewhere. But they weren't going to an exact point like we do today. Yes.
Surveying doesn't seem to me to be the exact science. There's something a little bit approximate about it. And my question is, does the land survey office reconcile, let's say, differences? Because why would these slight differences in the declination?
Sometimes they would. Sometimes they wouldn't. And where this really came up being obvious was after the American Revolution was over. Because Virginia was no longer a colony, it was a commonwealth. And now they got all these conflicts with different land being sold and stuff like that. And they had a real fun time for about the next, I don't know, probably 50, 60 years sorting that out. And not only in Virginia, other places as well. There's people down in Florida, their hobby is going out and trying to find land and asking claims by sorting. There's a place up in Colonial, up in Fairfax County. There's a Colonial Park up there. There's a triangle of ground up there. The fellow was telling us that he spent I don't know how many years working on it because Washington surveyed that area, and he swears up and down Washington never included that piece of ground in any surveys. I mean, we don't do it anyway. We just some people just. Any other questions? Oh, it'll be a quiz in about a half hour. I don't know how much time we've got left before we shut the building, but I want to come up here and look at some of my equipment as well as the compass and the chains back there. You're more than welcome to do it. So, again, thank you all very much.